All right. Okay. I just sent that out from my email, so they should all
Okay.
have the full link.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll get started with those that are here. Catherine, a pleasure doing this with you this evening and talking about investing in Mexico with ease. I know myself, in the clients that I work with and in real estate investing groups, investing in Mexico is something that comes up in discussions quite often. And, having someone like you here who's done that move, is involved in real estate in Mexico, works with investors down there. It's a pleasure to be able to collaborate with you on this. And as much as I know about some of the financing sides of investing in Mexico, I don't know the intricacies of making it happen, where to look for properties, what the markets are like, and all of those things that come with someone like yourself who is a professional in that realm.
Well, thank you, Keith. I'm excited to be here tonight with you doing this and being able to have a resource in Canada now who can help Canadians um, actually do this easier. And thank you for everyone for attending and joining, and anyone who signed up and may be trying to listen to this later on. Thank you very much. It's exciting to do this.
Yeah, so myself, my name is Keith Uti. Some of you know me, some of you do not. I'm a mortgage broker here in Canada, based in Calgary. Fortunate to be able to do commercial and residential mortgages throughout Canada, and have access to some lending in Mexico, which you'll learn about later. For me, I've been a real estate investor myself for 21 years now. Gosh, I think that dates me if I say it that way rather than saying since 2003. And, you know, it- it's a huge part of diversification and building wealth for the future. And for some, it's just about having a place that in the future they can retire so they can have their toes in their sand and the sun in their face, right? So, for me, my personal vision is all people are living a life of opportunity. And if this is not an opportunity to learn, then I'm not sure what that one would look like. So, Catherine, go ahead and give it a little introduction of yourself.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so for those of you, I think everyone knows me here, but if you don't, my name is Catherine Copeland. I am originally from Vancouver, Canada, and I moved down to Mexico in 2023 in November. I've actually been in real estate investing since 2011 in Canada. And during that time, I was working also as a project manager. So I have about 12 years of experience with construction and finance as a background in project management. So when I moved down here, I was doing that for a little while, and then I decided I wanted to use my skills and work in a different environment. I love the real estate investing world. I love people who are thinkers and doers and wanted to try something different. And I thought the best way to use my skills was to get into the real estate down here. So I got my license last December and have been working with my good friend since then. And really, what I want to do is really help people either make the move or invest in Mexico and do it well and do it successfully and do it with as much ease and flow as you possibly can. It can be very overwhelming for those who don't understand how things work. And especially if you are venturing off into parts of Mexico, there are places that have more regulations than others, and some places it's very Wild West. So, yeah, I want to help people in those areas.
It's awesome. Well, it's interesting as we start to get into talking about this a little bit more. And, I mentioned that people look to invest in Mexico because of getting their toes in their sand and the sun in their face. But you know, what are some of the things about why they should be considering investing in Mexico?
Well, first of all, your return on your investment is going to be much greater than you're going to be able to get in Canada and most places in the US. There's no cap rate here, so you really can charge whatever the market can bear. Just bear in mind that that also means when rents go down, you will be lowering your rents as well. Property taxes, your utility costs are all much lower than you're going to get, and you're going to be able to do Airbnb, which you can't do in a lot of places in Canada now, or not very easily. And I think some places in the States are starting to crack down on that as well. So you have opportunities of different ways to invest. Plus, we also have like as Mexico as a whole, we have a very good, strong, growing economy. It's not outrageous. You're not going to see huge peaks in it, but you're going to have a very steady growth in the economy. As of June, which was last reported, our GDP growth was 3.7, and our inflation rate was below that at about 3.4, 3.43. And we have a very young workforce here. Most of our population is under the age of 30. Um, Almost 50% of the population is under the age of 30. A lot of them are actually under the age of 25. So we have a young, strong workforce coming in. And our industry here is mostly actually industry and services is the greatest portion of our economy in Mexico as an overall. So tourism plays a part of it, agriculture plays a part as well, but really it's services and industry. And industry includes manufacturing as well. So we do a lot of that here, a lot of manufacturing, a lot of services based down here, including medical services, hospitality services. So those are the main industries down here for the economy. And we've actually are Latin America's #1 export center. So, and as of 2022, we were the largest importer into the United States.
Wow. And so having said that, I mean, those are fantastic things as far as it sounds like if you're moving maybe to live and work there. But when we look at, from an investment perspective, most people aren't going to live and work there, but they're
Mhm.
going to enjoy themselves, on a vacation. Maybe some are going to go and live there for 6 months and maybe will work temporarily from there or for a few months. So what are some of the things that, for those that, you're an investor there and you're buying for investment and the economic pieces are important. But what about tenant profile? What are some of the things that tenant profile, wise that visitors, the vacationers are looking for when they come to Mexico?
So where I'm at, I'm in Cabo San Lucas. So we are run by tourism here. Most of our services revolve around tourism. And so you're going to be drawing in most of your client profile here is going to be the foreigners coming in, whether it's on vacation, whether they are trying to live here for a few months to try it out, or they're coming here part-time for the year, escaping the winters in Canada and US. So those are going to be the majority of the clients that I would say that you would want to be targeting and having the better client profile with. It's a totally different market with the Mexican locals. And we can talk about that later, but as a strategy for most people here, I think your best strategy is going to be with the foreigners and the tourists.
And so when you say Cabo San Lucas, for those that don't know Mexico and where that is, where does that fall on the map of Mexico?
So we're in what's called the Baja Peninsula. And if you actually were to drive straight through California to the Mexican border and just keep going south, you're eventually going to hit us. We're right at the peak. We're at the tip there. You can't go any further. You'll end up in the water. So we have Pacific Ocean on one side. We have the Sea of Cortez on the other side, which flows from the Gulf of Mexico. And as a place, we're Mexican, but we're kind of separate from Mexico. Even the locals say like, yeah, we're Mexican, but we're not Mexico. Like we're Mexico, not Mexico, right? So that's kind of how even the locals refer to us here as like, yeah, well.
So what,
So
is there a larger population of foreigners in that area than locals as a rule of thumb or?
Well, actually, as a rule of thumb, the population is still predominantly Mexican. It's only about 30% of the population is actually foreigners down here, but it is growing because people have the ability now to work from home. People have their investments and savings, pensions, retiring. So it is growing down here just because we have direct access to so many places by flights, right? So most of the major cities and major hubs in the United States and in Canada have direct flights year round to Cabo San Lucas. Seasonally, though, what we call the high season, starting November 1st to April 30th, we actually get a lot more direct flights from more smaller jurisdictions or more Midwest or secondary airports in Canada and US. So we get more direct flights from there. We also get direct flights from Spain during our high season. And we just started, as of about a week ago, had our first flight directly from Germany. So we're
Wow.
actually expanding it.
so for those looking to invest, then there's some new markets that they could market their property to get tenants as well, with flights from Spain and now Germany as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And surprisingly, we do get a number of people from England and other parts of Europe coming as well. So they just
Wow.
have to make a little bit more of a longer trek.
And and so one of the things that, there can be a little bit of a stigma when people think about Mexico and that around safety. So what is, what's safety like in an area like Los Cabos?
So Los Cabos is really safe. It is actually it varies between the fourth and fifth top safest city in all of Mexico. I have to say personally, I feel safer here as a single white woman than I did in the Vancouver area in Canada. Even visiting my aunt and uncle this year in a neighborhood that's very high end, they actually were telling me some of the horror stories there lately. So definitely much safer here. And what actually plays into the safety is one, being that separated from the mainland of Mexico, it is harder access, right? You're having to fly here, you're having to take an 8 hour ferry boat from the mainland of Mexico to our capital city, La Paz, and then drive another 2 hours. Or you're going to have to drive all the way up to the Texas border, along the Texas border, and then all from the California border, drive all the way down the peninsula. So it is more of a journey to get here. So that's another reason to keep that the safety's here. The other reason too is because we're so tourist driven, we have a lot of federal and municipal police. We also have military who patrol frequently as well. And it's a little unnerving at first when you're on the beach and you see them in their full gear, carrying machine guns and rifles, but they're actually here as a deterrent for a lot of the crime. So it is keeping us safe here. If you're not going gambling, if you're not involved in the drug scene, and you keep keep in the good neighborhoods, you're not wandering off into some bad neighborhoods because there are bad neighborhoods everywhere you go, right? You stay in those areas, I would say you're relatively, much more safer than you would be in Canada and most places in the US, honestly.
And
So,
so when we look at, looking at Los Cabos, and you look at, you know, compared to maybe other parts of Mexico and looking at that peninsula, what are some of the qualities of things of services in the area that set it apart from maybe other parts of Mexico that people might consider investing in?
so we are very much focused with nature down here and the environment, in that we do a lot of preservation down here. So a lot of people are coming here, first of all, for the nature, second of all, for the sun. So we have about 350 days of sun down here. Currently, I think we're sitting at about 24 degrees Celsius, and it's November. And at nighttime we'll drop a few more degrees at night. I think last night we got down to about 17 degrees Celsius. So we have a very good weather. Summer can be hot, but we have good weather most of the year. The safety is the other part, but the nature. I mean, you're going to go fishing, you're boating, you're surfing, you're snorkeling, whale watching. We have in the state of Baja California Sur has 23 blue flag certified beaches, which is actually world recognized as beaches that are clean and have are doing ecological preservation. So they're preserving wildlife and marine life. And we actually, one of our big things down in this region is actually doing preservation for the sea turtle. So what they do is they go in groups, volunteer, scoop up all the eggs when they're laid, and then they go back and when they're hatching on the beaches so that the sea turtles can return back to the beaches and safely, without being attacked by predators like people, dogs, and birds when they're nested. So those are some
Wow.
of the big qualities.
And
The
so,
other,
yeah,
yeah.
sorry, and I was just going to ask also about, like, you know, what about health? Like, what about getting taken care of in health? If you need, some people I know fly. I know some people that just they go to Mexico to get health care. But what if if you've got clients or if you've got tenants that going there or you going there yourself, what about healthcare options?
So actually, we have top quality healthcare down here in Mexico. People don't realize that. They seem to think we're about 20 years ago where it wasn't so great. But we have some of the best medical facilities in Mexico now. We have some of the best doctors now. A lot of them do get internationally trained too, as well as Mexico, and then come back here. Um, and we do if you have a temporary or permanent residency visa, you can actually access public health care down here as well, which is much less the same as Canada, where there's waits and you're going to get into a doctor when you can or get into surgery when it's available. We also have private health care down here as well, which is actually can be very affordable and actually for any Americans can be a lot cheaper for them. You're going to get in quicker to get to procedures done, get things done. I have a friend actually who's been here. He's been here since he was 13. His family moved down here and now he's here with his family. And his family all went back to Canada eventually, but he says that he would never ever go back to Canada for treatment or the United States because what we have down here is far superior to what's being offered there and for a fraction of the price and the time. And
Wow.
last year I actually broke my leg. And I have to tell you, with private healthcare down here in my medical insurance, I was in and out in a hospital, had x-rays, saw a doctor, had a consultation with the surgeon as well, got a walking boot cast, and they drove me home in less than 2 hours, and it cost me less than $200 Canadian.
Wow.
And that
That's
was before,
incredible.
like that. I mean, that was because my deductible didn't even kick in for my insurance. So
Wow.
there you go.
There you go. Wow. And so for me, I know that, like the healthcare is great, but I don't speak Spanish. I mean, I learned my Spanish mostly from watching Dora the Explorer with my daughter when she was growing up. So that's the extent of my Spanish for the most part. And dos cerveza por favor. Which is important when you're on vacation. But what about being able to get by with, for those that don't speak English and you're looking to invest there, like how is that going to play?
You know what? A lot of people here do speak some English. Services like lawyers, notaries, pretty much are all bilingual. A lot of the doctors and surgeons are bilingual here, especially in the private healthcare. And then if you don't speak a lot of Spanish, there's a lot of resources to help you. There are, if you really need it, there's interpreters who, if you have legal documents that you need help with, you can have, somebody help you that way. Um, all of our documents for real estate are in English and Spanish so that you know exactly what you're signing when you're signing a real estate deal. Just note that if there is any discrepancies or disputes, it will fall back onto the Spanish document because it is the national language here. But you can get by if English is your language and you don't speak Spanish, right? And a lot of people are using Google Translate or other translator apps as well to help them get by with things. But it is easy to get people here who speak both languages help you out through the process or understand the processes and can explain things to you.
Yeah, and so, now that you've laid the groundwork about investing in Mexico, now let's get into kind of the nuts and bolts, which is, well, what about property and investing in real estate and properties themselves? So you put together this fantastic chart of information here about, about how for houses in Mexico. I know we've got a couple, you've got one for condos too. So help us understand a little bit about peaks and valleys of real estate there and a little bit about, these charts of information because there's a lot going on here. But I know you've got it broken down for us really well.
Yeah, so a couple things to point out is the pink line is the active medium price. So that is what places are listed at right now on our MLS. Um, what I also want to point out is my numbers here that I wrote on the side are based on a median number on good neighborhoods that you're going to be investing in as a foreigner that are not the luxury neighborhoods. So these are not all the neighborhoods. There are obviously other properties in other neighborhoods at much lower prices and much higher prices, but I wanted to pick the ones that people are going to be investing in for as a foreigner, whether it's for their investment property, whether it's their vacation home, whether they're thinking spending 6 months here and escaping winter. So that's what I did. So the median prices on that is going to be different than what you're going to see on the graph. Also pay attention to the orange line is what I want you to know. When they say sold median sale, that is when a property closes. So our property to close a property from the date of offer being accepted to closing date average is 30 to 45 days. It's a bit of a process. It has to go to notaries and lawyers, and then as a foreigner, it's going to the banks for the fideicomicios, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then it has to come back and then be submitted to lands and titles and be approved. So once all of that process is done, we call it a sold property, and that's when it's complete. So the peaks there with the blue dots on there, those are reflective of the times when those properties are completed and when they're sold, what we call sold. So when you see things from there are closures as well, though, during the holidays, especially during December through January. There's a lot of holidays here. There's a lot of religious holidays in Mexico that are observed nationally. So those all are going to affect when things close. So if you're buying anything, I would say basically after November 15th through to the new year, you can expect your average closing time on that property to take up to 60 days. Reason is we have a religious holiday, December 12th, that's observed. From December 15th to January 15th, all government offices are closed. We have 2 weeks off at Christmas, so lawyers and notaries are going to be shutting their doors for Christmas and New Year's. And then December 5th, or not December 5th, January 5th, we have another religious holiday. So that will also be a closure for the lawyers and notaries. So they're going to come back from their holidays and they're going to be playing catch up. So that's why it can take, almost 60 days after a holiday to close. So that explains some of the peaks when you're looking at it going, why in March are we closing so much? That's why. It's catch up from basically from November 15th onwards.
Well, and the peak, and that's when it looks like the peaks are for pricing, but actually the pricing peak actually happened 2 to 3 months earlier when people were making the offers, not when they actually closed, because that you don't report until it actually closes. So
Correct. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
period of time, if so when based on what you said, need to be aware of looking at that period of time when the peak is, might be when you want to actually be looking at buying, because the market's already started to shift in the other direction. And we can see that the trend here, I mean, the trend line on that blue line is in an upward direction, over the last 5 years. So
Yeah, people started to realize it was a good idea to come to Mexico, and there was, better quality of life, more freedom, more ROI on your properties. So,
wow. So then what if we go look at, now if we look at condos
mhm.
and 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 look at what's available there, what what similarities to the houses are there? I mean, there's the peak and valley, I think, is similar, but this seems to have a lot more movement than the housing one.
Yeah, so what happened is they started to build a lot of condos here in Los Cabos, particularly. They're starting to now build out in the other areas like La Paz. But they've started building a lot of condos. So people are coming in as foreigners and they're just drawn to the condo market now because there is less selection of properties and houses. They're also finding that if their strategy is to do, let's say, Airbnb type of rentals, that sometimes they're making more money on a condo than they would on a house. So it just really depends on what their strategy is. But because of the foreigners coming in, everybody started building condos. And we actually had a boom where everything was taking a long time to close on the condos and complete, and then everything completed all at once. And so we have this really strange boom there about a year and a half ago, I believe it is. Uh,
Early
yeah,
2023 there.
yeah, early 2023. So that's when a lot of these condo projects completed. So they got, obviously with COVID and stuff too, they got delayed as well.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, since the beginning of 20, there was definitely, you can see the rise in the value from, middle of 2022 to the start of 2023. But since the start of 2023, it's been more flat in the price gains, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean that's just because right now there's a lot of stock in condos. Um, And so people now have more selection in the product on the market. So they're not all rushing to buy in pre-sales anymore. They can take their time, really figure out the best quality product for themselves and their budget and their strategies and the neighborhoods they want to be in. So before, people, I think, were kind of in a desperation mode because there was so much pre-sales going on and everybody wanted a piece of it. And now people have kind of calmed down and realized we have a lot on the market. We don't need to rush into something unless it's a project we really strongly believe in and know the quality of them, which I can help them with.
Yeah, and so now, so now that we've looked a little bit at that market, is, you've so greatly put together some analysis here on cash flow for buying, for in this case, buying a house in
Mhm.
in Mexico. Just looking at from a cash flow perspective, based on, and this one's set up based on people using funds that they borrow from in Canada, against Canadian real
Yeah.
estate. And so just point out to us some of the keys that we need to, I mean, there's a lot of information here. We're not going to go through all of it, and this is a great piece of what you provide to your clients, when they are looking to invest in Mexico. This is something they can expect to see from you. What are things they need to pay attention to, here when we're looking at this cash flow analysis?
So this is actually based on a real property for sale. That house is actually for sale right now. It is listed at 425,000 US dollars. And I'll just point out everything you see is going to be in US dollars when we're talking real estate because of the foreign influence. We've been marketing to the foreigners and it's been mostly Americans for a number of years. We've had some Canadians, but now we're seeing more influx in Canadians coming down. So that's why the US dollar pricing. But when you close the sale, it is completed on the day of sale in pesos. So just that is something to be aware of, that it is converted on that day's rate into pesos from the what we show as the listed price or the agreed upon price. So the agreed upon price is in US dollars and that's converted to pesos. The other thing I want to point out is that very rarely does a property sell at listing price. It usually sells below listing price and people are aware of that. So they anticipate negotiating a price on the property. So when a seller puts their property up, very rarely do they expect to get the price they list it for. Another thing I want to point out is that you're going to need about 35% down or more to qualify for mortgages in Mexico. So it is a higher percentage down than you would expect to be doing in Canada or the United States. And you can still get the 30, in some cases still get 30-year mortgage rates through Canada. And I think in the States they offer them as well. But the biggest piece to take on here is the closing costs. So the closing costs are all your legal fees with lawyers, notaries. It's the biggest cost of this is going to be the creation of that fideicomiso. So let me just explain the fideicomiso real quick because most people don't know what it is. Mexico has a law that states that no foreigner can own land within 50 kilometers of open water, like an ocean or big river, or within 100 kilometers of an international border. Mexico decided that they wanted to do an addendum to that law. And in 1973, they created what's called a fideicomiso, and it's known as a bank trust. So this is what allows a foreigner to buy and hold property down here. You have full rights like a Mexican does. You can buy it, sell it, rent it, renovate, build on the property if it permits it. So you have that full permission that a Mexican does. But the bank is basically vouching for you because you're legally not allowed to be on that, owning that land. So this is how Mexico got around that law, was just to make an addendum with the fideicomiso. But that being said, that is the largest cost if you're closing as well. So I always tell people to anticipate minimum 7%, but optimally 10% of the purchase price as your closing costs. And that's going to cover all of those closing costs, including the creation of the fideicomiso.
Yeah, and I've got some further breakdown on that later on as well. And so looking at the cash flow here, there's the Airbnb and there's the long-term 1-year contract, two differences here. And I'm seeing some huge differences here in the cash flow. So, I mean, really, what would be like if you're looking at this from purely cash flow perspective, why would you even consider a long-term contract when it's thousands of dollars in different in cash flow than doing, nightly Airbnb rental.
I think the only reason you would really be considering a long-term rental for the cash flow is if you're more concerned about asset protection, stability in rental income coming in and making sure things are being paid for. You're going to look at the Airbnb more on you want that quick cash, or not quick cash, but more cash, let's say. But you're going to work harder for that money at times as well, because during the high season, you can collect much higher nightly rates. But during the low season, you're going to be dropping those rates. And on average, you're going to get about 75 to 80% of rentals during the high season. That's when you're making all your cash. During the low season, which is May 1st through to October 31st, you're average going to get 5 nights a month on Airbnb, right? So it's a huge swing in difference on your vacancy rates on the properties. And some people don't want to worry about the marketing that takes, the strategies that take, and they just want to have something that just gives them the check every single month and they can collect the cash and let the equity grow. So that's going to be the difference on what you're going to do. So it just depends on your strategy. And also maybe tax reasons. There might be a reason that you might want to do a long term for tax purposes over a short term as well. There might be some advantages or disadvantages to doing that. So that's what you're going to look at.
Yeah, and definitely have to make sure you know how to budget yourself if you're gonna, use that Airbnb, because you got to make sure you can cover your expenses in those low seasons. But then,
Yeah.
there's also the, getting financing that's either right from Mexico or from lenders that will lend on property in Mexico. And there's quite a difference here again in the cash flow when we look at this. But tell us a little bit about, you got rents are the same, but certainly mortgage payments are much higher. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But again,
Mhm.
it's, that Mexican financing, but some people want to do it because then they're not dealing with a Canadian or US lender. They want to deal with a lender that's going to be, is going to secure their property in Mexico. So
Right.
this is and it's interesting to really dig into this when you're an investor looking at buying an investment property in Mexico.
Yeah, so mortgages, I mean, debt in general, like mortgages, credit cards, are a fairly, what I would say, fairly new idea in Mexico. They've maybe been around 10, 15 years for most people. It hasn't been, so it was a cash society before, or you would do creative deals with people, right? So the mortgage rates are on average between 9% and 10.5% with a Mexican bank down here. Um, and that will fluctuate depending on your age and income. So it's not just in Canada and US, we're pretty used to qualifying for a mortgage based on our assets and income. Here it's assets, income, and age all play a factor into it. Also, they only offer 20-year mortgages maximum, but they will allow you possibility to renew that after 20 years as well. So you're not going to be stuck in saying we need the full payment now at 20-year mark. You could look at it at 18-year mark and say, don't think we're going to make that full, or we need a little extra time, and you can apply to refinance it.
Yeah, that's fantastic information and that you're sharing. Does anybody have any questions for Catherine at this point with the things that she's so greatly covered in such great detail so far? If you have any questions, put them in the chat. You can even unmute yourself and ask. So certainly, if you have any questions or any questions throughout, don't hesitate to put them in the chat or to ask. So, any questions for Catherine at this point?
This is Jen. I don't have a question, but I just want to say great job, Catherine. I really appreciate your expertise and professionalism and knowledge, and I'm looking forward to learning more. So great job.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we'll continue on then.
I just want to like one little mention about the Mexican mortgages. Um, who would consider using them would be someone if it's maybe a last choice. You don't qualify in Canada or US anymore because most of your stuff isn't there, or things like that. Or you might have a tax strategy that it's more beneficial to have everything in Mexico and not in Canada or US. So that's just a little pointed out. There could be a reason why you would want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's always part of the consideration, right? Tax
Mm.
strategies. It's
Yeah.
it's always important. But as we now get into financing, I'm going to talk a little bit about helping and making sure people understand down payment requirements, what you can do to self-fund using equity from property, here in Canada, what a Canadian-based lender looks like who lends on property in Mexico, what the Mexican banks look like and the requirements, maybe even some developer seller financed options, as well as then looking at the numbers, because the numbers are quite surprising when you dig into this. So when it comes to the down payment, you need to expect that you're going to need to provide anywhere from 30 to 50% down payment. And this is depending on the lender option you're choosing. And so that has a great impact. And it will need to be converted to pesos in the end to complete the transaction. But you want to make sure you're using confirmed wire transfer providers and tracking for this, because it is done through escrow, and escrow is used for the security of your money. But again, you always want to make sure you know who and what services you're using, and that your money's going to be safe.
And just one note on the escrow. Escrow is not commonly used throughout all of Mexico. It's commonly used in the state of Baja California Sur because the realtors down here are brought that service in and that legalization in. A lot of places in Mexico, it is still very Wild West, so be careful.
Yeah, and and as you're going to see when we look at some details, we look at the numbers. There's actually a two-stage process. Escrow is just but one part of the process for securing the down payment. There's all the legal and notary stuff. So another way to consider is self-funding the purchase using equity from a property in Canada. Now, this could be a primary home, this could be an existing rental home, but you can use that equity, get it at a much lower interest rate than you're going to get for any Mexican lending, and being able to then deduct that interest from your Canadian taxes. So if you borrow in Canada, if you borrow funds to invest, even if it's internationally, for an unregistered investment, and your intent is to earn a return on your investment, the interest on those borrowed funds is tax deductible, and that really falls into the realm of the Smith maneuver. I am a Smith maneuver certified professional here in Canada and have implemented the Smith maneuver myself since 2005. So that's something, if you're interested in learning more about that, I certainly am here to help you with that. But obviously, that lower interest is going to give you better cash flow, much better cash flow, as we saw earlier. Like 10 to $11,000 US better cash flow. So certainly worth the consideration if that's the route you're going. And it may be that you just need it to access the down payment. Maybe you don't need it for the full mortgage, but maybe it's just for the down payment. That, could be a possibility. But if you are using equity and you're going to have enough equity to be able to make a cash offer, well, then working with Catherine, she's going to be able to negotiate and get you better pricing with you making a cash offer versus, something where you're having to go and then look for financing. And speed that process up along the way as well, which we heard is crucial because the process is slower. But there is also a Canadian-based lender that will lend on Mexican properties, and they can actually cross-collateralize the Canadian property with the Mexican property. So maybe you need the Canadian property for down payment, but you want lending also to be collateralized on the Mexican property. They can do that. However, they will only lend in certain designated areas of Mexico. And if you're going to go this route and you're going to look at it, and this is something you want to consider, we can review those areas with you because they do change over time. It's an easier qualification than it would be to go and qualify for a lending at a bank against Canadian property. And in some cases, even easier than going to a bank in Mexico to qualify. But there are fees that are applicable. There's lender fees, broker fees, legal fees that are going to be applicable. But your lending and your repayment are done in Canadian dollars. So there's no two-step conversion of Canadian to US and then US to pesos, or if it is potentially just one, but there's no conversion there. That's all handled by them. But they do require a minimum 30% down payment, which is actually pretty good in the realm of investors investing in Mexico and being able to buy property with only 30% down. And even buying a primary home, it's 30% down. You do have to have a minimum credit score of 700. And even the Mexican banks have credit score requirements. So just you have to keep that in mind. Some people get caught up with this one, thinking they're going to go buy a property in Mexico, and they actually don't know that there is a credit score requirement. But you will see interest rates of 11 to 12% with this product. It is more like a private lending product for sure. But it's, when you're lending on Mexico in Mexican properties and getting lending in Mexico, it can be anywhere from 9.5 to 10.5, 11% as well. So, but they will lend on a variety of different types of properties, single family detached homes, your duplex and single family attached homes, as well as row townhouses and apartment style condos. So they cover the realm of properties that people would invest in. They don't lend on land or commercial property. However, they are an option that exists. They do also, one of the things though with a lender like this is they will have a limited amount of funds available for lending on these properties. So that can be a fluctuation and be a roadblock that sometimes you run into with this lender. Mexican banks, well, you do not need to be a Mexican resident to borrow from a Mexican bank. However, if that's the case, you're going to expect to provide 50% loan to value or 50% down payment because their maximum loan to value is 50%. They do have a minimum credit score requirement that you have to meet. You will have to provide your tax returns and proof of income. And that's
And the
not
tax
just the
Sure.
rental income. That's
Yeah, and the tax returns are for your past 2 years minimum.
Yeah, minimum past 2 years. You have to get bank references from your current bank in Canada to provide to them. And you need to have either a migrant or non-migrant visa, which Catherine referenced earlier. And you need to have an age between 18 and 70. They won't lend to you. If you're 70 years old, they won't lend to you. And depending on how close you are to 70-year-olds, they will limit the length of the term of the loan as well. You must have title to the property, and you are required to have life insurance to cover the mortgage amount. And there may be annual renewal fees, whether it's the lender or whether it's the state. There's annual renewal fees that you have to be aware of, which if you own property, there's going to be state annual renewal fees, but the lender may also have annual renewal fees. One of the things that is also possible, though, especially when you're working with a realtor and they know which developers or maybe a seller that's willing to look at seller finance property, is those pre-sale opportunities, which may be available through developer financing, or maybe it's a development that's done and they're looking to get rid of property, and so they offer seller financing. But they often, on these pre-sale opportunities, they require your full down payment up front. So if they're going to finance you and they're going to do it at 50% loan to value, they require your 50% down payment up front. But they are flexible payment options that they generally will come up with as far as your monthly payments on what they're financing you. But you usually can get better terms from the developer when you're putting 50% down. If it's on a pre-sale, though, upon completion, they might finance you during the term of construction, but upon completion, they require full payment. So you have to have a mortgage in place upon completion where you're going to pay out what they financed you during the construction phase. And they may offer, if those that are doing this more as a plan and part of their exit strategy, they may offer you a 5 to 10-year term. There's not as many that will do that, but you don't know until you ask. But bigger than just, which lender is understanding what it looks like when you're doing a purchase. So I ran through a little investment property purchase review here. This one is based on buying a property for $500,000 US and putting 30% down. with a lender fee of $7,000. So that's all great, but so your down payment and money you need for down payment is 157, but your closing costs are around $60,000. I'm going to go into that in the next slide. And this is based on a 30-year amortization and based on using a Mexican lender at 11.9%. Now, that changes your monthly payment, but it does not change your down payment and or your closing costs because those are not going to change. What changes is your monthly payment. So when we look at the funds required, there's property acquisition costs, there's trust fees, there's notary and legal fees, there's taxes and duties. So we can see on this that notary fees are just about $12,000 US or 16,500 Canadian. Then there's the registration for public registry and transfer taxes. Well, look at the public registration is over $10,000 Canadian. And the transfer tax alone is $38,000. And then government closing costs, well, they're peanuts compared to the other two. But again, you're $51,000 just in taxes and duties to complete this transaction. So when you're looking at what do you need to buy a property in Mexico, it's not just that you need the 30% down. You need 30% down plus another 11%, approximately, or more. So then we move down and we get into trust fees, the foreign affairs fees registration and the banking trust fees of an 8,000. So these will all can add up, but then we come down to legal costs, and you can see how there is the separate escrow and legal fees that we referenced earlier. So escrow is for the security of your deposit. The legal fees are for the actual lawyer doing the work. And so in the end, when you look at this property, it was a $500,000 US or $720,000 Canadian. If we just going to go back to the previous slide. You see it was $702,000 Canadian based on a current conversion rate, 500,000. We're talking, that's easily into that realm of $85,000 of costs over and above your down payment Canadian that you need to worry about. So, that's about 12% of your purchase price that you have to have in addition. So you really have to know your numbers and be highly aware of that when you are going to be investing in Mexico. Any questions on those numbers?
No, but this is Bruce. Catherine and Keith, may I just, from a contracts attorney standpoint, may I just offer one bit of advice for anyone if you're doing the seller developer financing. Please make sure you have baked into your contract milestones for when the construction of the investment property has to be completed by. That way, there's no, you won't have a seller developer saying, "Well, I'm going to get to it." Make sure those milestones are baked into your contract, and that will make sure that the project is completed on time. That's my only advice.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Good point, Bruce. That's why you need to work with someone who's an experienced realtor that has the support and has the knowledge to be able to help you work on those things and negotiate those things as well, because you're here, you're not necessarily there, and those are critical points that have to be covered off.
Absolutely.
And I just want to jump in on that too. I personally only maybe could list on one hand the number of developers I would actually recommend anyone buy in a pre-sale here, because they have the quality and experience of proving quality products completed in the time frame that they have anticipated within a month or two. So to be honest, there's very few pre-sale projects I would recommend to people. If they're really hot to trot on a pre-sale, I probably can list on one hand the developers who I would introduce you the product to.
Yeah, agreed.
Go ahead, Bruce.
No, I'm just saying, I was in total agreement with Catherine that you have to be very careful. But
yeah, absolutely.
Just be careful what you do.
Yeah, and that's always, doesn't matter where you're investing. right?
That's true.
It really doesn't matter where it is. You have to dot the i's and cross the t's, right? All the time.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, developers have failed in Canada and the US on pre-sales as well due to various circumstances or run off with people's money because they weren't quite on the up and up. So it's happened everywhere. It's just, I think we hear about it more in Mexico because there hadn't been as much regulation in the country for so long.
Yeah. So Catherine, what are some of these keys here that you've got for investing in Mexico?
So now, I mean, back in the day, you could have walked in, bought a property, you didn't need all these documents. It was pretty easy, in one regard, being a foreigner to buy a property. Now there is a lot more regulation and it is getting more structured here. So you do need to get a residency permit, whether it's temporary or permanent now. I mean, it is still possible to do it without, but it's going to make your life a lot easier to have it here, to do business, to pay your bills, to do just transact and run your investment down here. So I would say it's a highly recommended to get your visa down here, whether it's temporary or permanent. Permanent is not always issued right away, so you may have to go through temporary to get to permanent. This is something you're going to be planning in advance. This isn't something you're going to make the decision go, tomorrow I'm buying a property in Mexico and here's my money in the bank. It's going to be a bit more of a process, especially if you need financing, and to really just get all the information that you need and getting set up to do that deal. So you might decide today, I want to buy in Mexico, and that's great. I'm going to help you with it. Keith's going to help you, or whoever else we need to bring in to help you out with it. But understand it, you do need to plan in advance for this, for the closings and for structuring how you're paying your bills. You also have to decide if you're buying this as an individual or as a Mexican corporation. And there might be reasons why you decide to do a Mexican corporation because it might offer you some tax advantages if that's in your tax strategy. So you might want to do that. And if you're doing the Mexican corporation, it does take a little bit more time because it's going to take you about a month at best, a month and a half to actually create that corporation down here. So it's important to understand how you're buying your property as well down here. And that will also determine on whether or not you need a fideicomiso. Mexican corporations are Mexican entities, so they do not need a fideicomiso, but there are benefits to having a fideicomiso for asset protection. So a lot of wealthy Mexicans are now actually buying fideicomisos on their properties, even though it's not required of them. Setting up your bank accounts to pay bills, you need to have a temporary residency visa to set up a bank account. And you also need a tax ID to set up your bank account down here, which means you need a temporary residency visa. You can't get a tax ID in Mexico without that temporary residency visa. They used to be able to go in the bank and they would kind of do some things and make things work, even though it was required to have those documents. Now they can't do that anymore. So very, very few banks are actually able or willing to, walk outside the lines now, let's say, to open the bank accounts without those documents. And setting up your bank account to pay bills is going to make your life a lot easier now, especially if you're not living here and you're getting a property manager. You could give money to a property management company and put it in their bank account, but understand the minute money hits in a Mexican's bank account, it's automatically taxable income for them. So it's going to make their life more stressful and harder. They're going to want more money from you. It's going to be easier for you in the end to have your own Mexican bank account that the bills are being drawn from. You can easily set it up to have your property manager on the account so that they're allowed to pay bills and use the debit credit card or credit card to do those things, or withdraw the cash in the case that they have to pay cash for a bill. And you can easily take them off as well, so that you have full control and security over the money that way. But you will need to, I highly recommend doing it that way, especially if you're not living here. Speaking Spanish, we talked about earlier, yes, you don't need to speak Spanish, but if you can start learning some Spanish, it's going to make your life a lot easier down here. It's going to help you reduce your misunderstandings with people, especially when it comes to property management or service people, or all your contracts, all the business is done in Spanish. So you're definitely going to need some help with the Spanish there. And if you speak Spanish, oftentimes you can negotiate better prices for services as well down here. So even a little bit of Spanish helps. It has people respect you more and being more willing to help you as well. So start with some basics, but Spanish is really important down here because it is still the national language. I want to also say respect the people, country, and culture here. It is different than Mexico or than Canada and United States. It is Mexico. So as much foreign influence as we have from the north, they still are very much their own culture. And there is a way to do things down here to get better results from people. There's a way, of understanding that is really important with the culture. So if you don't have those things, you can get by, but things would be a lot more difficult if you don't. And overall, I just want to say everything here is different. It is a process. It's not, really snap and quick like we have in Canada and US, where you walk into a bank and same day you have your bank account open, same day you can get issued a credit card. There's a process to these things, and you just need to have a lot of patience and understand it is done in Spanish. So you may be bringing a friend, a neighbor, to these appointments with you. You might need to download a translator app to help you before to navigate some of these things, because when you open a bank, many of the bank managers will not speak English or very well to open your bank accounts, and you have to have an appointment with a bank manager, right? You can't just walk into the teller. And then I just want to say, be willing to adopt. You're going to have so much better of an experience down here if you can adopt to the changes and the way things are done down here than trying to push the way that things are done in Canada and the US.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I have to say, having everything that you've shared certainly makes us realize that we're treated pretty well here in Canada and in the US when it comes to our process for buying and selling real estate, and the simplicity of it, and even the low costs that we pay for the most part, depending on maybe certain provinces in Canada, the low cost that we do pay for the transaction of buying and selling real estate. And so, I think that it's super valuable and important that they have the ability to have someone like you on their team if you're looking to invest in the US. And I know that Catherine has put together and realized that people and investors that are coming from Canada, they need help and assistance. They need, in fact, a lot of hand holding to be able to make these transactions successful, because again, you're going into somewhere that you don't know the nuances. So working with someone who does is worth it, and it's going to save you money and stress in the long run. And so, Catherine, you've got a fantastic personalized coaching program for people that want that help with investing in Mexico with ease. And so, and you've offered a great discount off it today. But, some of the highlights you've got here are things that, we take for granted. And so, we think it's not so easy probably to get your visa and understand the nuances of these things. So tell us a little bit more about your program.
So this is 8 weeks of personalized coaching with you, one-on-one over Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever system is going to work best for us. Typically, each coaching session is about 2 hours because there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of different scenarios that we go through and situations that we discuss to figure out what is going to be the best suited for you. And I also, I'm in contact with you by WhatsApp and email throughout the week too. So when you're having concerns or that, task has come up and you're like, you really need an answer, or what do I do with this, or how do I proceed from here, I'm available to you as well. Some of the things I'm helping you with is I'm going to walk you through the step of how to get your temporary or permanent residency visa if you qualify for that here. I'm going to walk you through the whole entire process of what to do, how to best present yourself to get those approvals, where to go to do that as well. I'm also going to help you with what the benefits are, because a lot of people think, well, I don't need it. I can get by without it. There are a lot of benefits to having your temporary or permanent residency visa. And I'll go over all of that with you as well, including there could be some benefits on the tax wise. I'm not an accountant or lawyer or a financial advisor, but I can say that some people do find benefits of owning investments in Mexico because they have a temporary residency visa or a permanent residency visa. I'm going to guide you through the whole entire process of purchasing your property or renting the property as well. It is not as easy and simple and direct as it is in Canada and the US. So I'm going to go through that whole process with you and take you step by step through that. I'm also going to help you with property management. I can introduce you to some people, but I'm also going to help guide you through the process of property management because it's a fairly new industry down here as a profession. There's a lot of learning that people are still doing down here. So if you are an investor, I'm going to help you understand what we need to help set up in place with the property managers and making sure that they can run in a system that works really well with you. I'm going to help you also set up the steps on how you're setting up utilities and your banking, how to get the credit cards all set up. Again, like I said, everything's a process down here. And I had a heck of a time trying to even get my internet set up in my place that I rent. So I just want to point that out. You don't just call them up and say, I need this, here's my address. I'm going to introduce you to all my contacts for taxes, who can help you with maybe asset protection and planning, insurance, other services, accounting as well. I'm going to help guide you through the culture and help you really understand the culture down here so that when you are dealing with people, whether it's your property manager or other services or banking, you understand and you're going to get along better and things are going to move smoother for you. And then helping you also integrate in the community so that you can actually really enjoy your investment and this isn't a big extra strain on you and stress. And I'm also going to go through property ownership structure. Like I mentioned earlier, there's different ways you can buy property, whether it's as an individual, through a fideicomiso, or through a Mexican corporation. So I'm going to walk you through the different options and we can discuss the pros and cons of each one and figure out which one's the best solution for you. And then I'm going to go through a lot more other things that come up as we're in discussion as well. So it's all individually personalized to you and your needs and what your concerns and questions are and helping you structure that proper plan.
Well, it's
And so,
fantastic, and you've offered a great discount off of your program cost, which your program cost is well worth it when you consider all of the guidance and the time that you're giving to people who need this assistance. And there's no strings attached to it. They can work with you and buy somewhere else in Mexico if that's what they choose, but they need to understand that, making sure they understand if they're buying somewhere else what the nuances are or buying in a different area. So
yeah, absolutely.
it's
And
been
I
a
have
pleasure.
contacts too who I could also introduce them to if they are wanting to look in other areas of Mexico that I know would be honest and helpful to them in some of the process. So yeah, whether Los Cabos or the state of Baja California Sur is right for someone or not, we can have that conversation. And if it's not, I can help guide you to somebody else who can take care of you and making sure you're not getting scammed.
And this offer is going to be available for a few days here after this, as we're going to send out the recording to everyone that was registered so that they get it. And you can certainly share it. Those people who signed up, they can certainly share it as well. And reach out to Catherine for more information on her program. And I think we're also going to send out information about the program with the recording so that you have the more in-depth details of what that involves. But to reach out to Catherine, you can reach her, Catherine, at catherinecopeland.com. Boy, it's pretty straightforward and simple, I have to say. If yeah, you made that pretty easy. For myself, Keith at enrichmortgage.ca, happy to talk to you about your financing options, what structure, what possibilities exist, and how we can make sure that you can be successful and have the best opportunity to build wealth and have great cash flow on investments in Mexico. Catherine, is there anything final words that you've got?
I just want to thank everyone here for their time tonight and this afternoon. It's been really amazing to do this with you, Keith. I know we've been brainstorming for a while how we could work together, and finally an opportunity arose where Canada opened up some doors and allowed us to do this. And I just want to point out that the program I'm offering, the coaching, it is for anyone who is interested in going further and looking deeper into investing in Mexico. It's also for anyone who's deciding they're going to stick their toe in and into the waters and test it out. And I'll work with you with whatever your needs are for your strategies and your concerns around that. So Yeah, thank you
Fabulous.
very
I,
much.
I know that you're someone who you can customize as needed, right? Doesn't whether someone's looking to invest or whether maybe somebody might be looking to actually buy and move to Mexico. You work with them both. But tonight we're
Absolutely, yeah.
focusing on the investment side of it. And that's, investing is a big place in my heart and what I believe in and love. So, but there is those that want to be able to buy, and whether it's buy and move and live there, or whether they want to buy and live there for parts of the year. There's both of those that exist, and I know you can help them with both. So again, thank
And
you to
some
everyone
people, yeah.
who joined us tonight.
And
And
some people move full time, Keith, right? So some
That's
people are
right.
here the whole year. They've had enough of whatever's going on. So,
There's no uncertainty in this world. Come on.
oh, never.
But we won't get political. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure having you all here. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Catherine and I. And have yourselves a great evening.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Great.